The first story, The Haunted Room. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, there stood an old Victorian house. Known for its intricate architecture, the house had a room that was rarely used. This room, tucked away on the second floor, had a reputation for giving off an eerie vibe. It was said to be haunted, but few took the rumors seriously. That changed when the Johnson family moved in. Sarah Johnson, a curious teenager, decided to turn the room into her personal study space. On her first night there, she felt a strange chill despite it being summer. The air felt thick, and shadows seemed to move on their own. As Sarah sat at her desk, she heard a faint whisper. Thinking it was her imagination, she ignored it. But the whispers grew louder and clearer, repeating her name. Fear gripped her as she turned around, only to see the room empty. Over the next few days, the occurrences intensified. Objects would move on their own, and eerie sounds echoed through the room. One night, Sarah saw a ghostly figure of a woman in old-fashioned clothing standing by the window. The figure's eyes were hollow, and her expression was one of sorrow. Terrified, Sarah ran out of the room and told her parents. They were skeptical until they too experienced strange phenomena. Lights flickered, and cold spots appeared in the room despite the warm weather. They decided to research the house's history. They discovered that a young woman named Emily had lived there over a century ago. Emily was confined to the room after falling ill, and she died tragically, isolated and heartbroken. It was said that her spirit lingered, unable to find peace. Determined to help, the Johnson family reached out to a local historian and a paranormal investigator. Together, they conducted a séance, hoping to communicate with Emily's spirit. During the séance, Emily's ghost appeared and communicated through the historian, expressing her sadness and desire for closure. The family held a memorial service for Emily, honoring her memory and laying her spirit to rest. After the ceremony, the room felt lighter, and the eerie occurrences ceased. Sarah and her family finally felt at peace in their home. The haunted room became a part of the Johnson family's history, a reminder of the ghostly presence that once haunted it. The story of Emily's spirit and the family who helped her find peace became a local legend passed down through generations. The second story, The Room in the Attic. In the small town of Millfield, there was an abandoned mansion known as the Blackwood Estate. The townsfolk avoided it, whispering about the cursed room in the attic. Legend had it that anyone who spent the night there would never be the same again. Curious and skeptical, a group of college students decided to spend a weekend at the mansion for a thrill. Among them was Emma, a history major fascinated by the mansion's dark past. They brought sleeping bags, flashlights, and enough food to last the weekend. On the first night, they explored the mansion, which was dusty and filled with cobwebs. The attic room was at the end of a narrow, creaky staircase. When they opened the door, a wave of cold air greeted them. The room was small, with a single window and an old wooden chair in the center. Ignoring the unease, the group set up their sleeping bags and started telling ghost stories. As midnight approached, strange things began to happen. The temperature dropped sharply, and they heard faint whispers echoing in the room. Emma, feeling a strange pull, sat in the wooden chair. As soon as she did, she felt a heavy weight on her chest, as if something was pressing down on her. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her friends watched in horror as her eyes rolled back and her body convulsed. Terrified, they managed to pull Emma out of the chair. She regained consciousness, but something was different. Her eyes had a distant, haunted look. She spoke in a voice that wasn't her own, warning them to leave the mansion immediately. The group fled the attic, dragging Emma with them. They spent the rest of the night in the living room, too scared to sleep. Emma's condition worsened. She seemed possessed, mumbling incoherently about a man named Jonathan. The next morning, they decided to investigate the attic room's history. At the local library, they found records of Jonathan Blackwood, the mansion's original owner. Jonathan was a reclusive writer who had gone mad and was found dead in the attic, sitting in the same wooden chair. His spirit was said to haunt the room, seeking revenge on anyone who dared to intrude. Determined to free Emma from the spirit's grasp, they contacted a local priest. He agreed to perform an exorcism in the attic room. As the priest chanted prayers and sprinkled holy water, Emma screamed and thrashed violently. After what felt like hours, a dark shadow emerged from Emma's body and dissipated into thin air. She collapsed, exhausted but free from the spirit's influence. The priest warned them never to return to the attic room. The group left the mansion, and Emma slowly recovered from the ordeal. They never spoke of the incident again, but the haunted attic room remained a chilling reminder of the night they faced the wrath of Jonathan Blackwood's vengeful spirit. Third story, the Room of Reflections. In the heart of New Orleans, there was a historic hotel known for its grand architecture and luxurious amenities. However, Room 213 had a sinister reputation. Guests who stayed there reported strange occurrences, from eerie reflections in mirrors to unsettling noises at night. In July 2024, the hotel hosted a paranormal investigation team led by Dr. Emily Carter. Emily had a background in psychology and a deep interest in the supernatural. Her team was determined to uncover the truth about Room 213. The team arrived with advanced equipment, EMF detectors, infrared cameras, and audio recorders. Emily and her colleague, Mark, set up a base in the adjacent room to monitor the activity in Room 213 remotely. On the first night, Emily decided to spend the night in Room 213 alone. She meticulously documented her experience, noting every sound and movement. Around midnight, the room's atmosphere changed. The temperature dropped, and a thick mist began to form around the large antique mirror on the wall. Emily watched in disbelief as a shadowy figure appeared in the mirror's reflection. It was a woman dressed in Victorian-era clothing, her eyes filled with sorrow. The figure reached out as if trying to communicate. Emily felt a chill run down her spine, but stood her ground, trying to interact with the apparition. "Who are you?" Emily asked, her voice steady. The figure's lips moved, but no sound came out. Instead, Emily heard a faint whisper in her ear, "Help me." Determined to uncover the mystery, Emily delved into the hotel's history the next day. She discovered that in the late 1800s, a young woman named Lydia had stayed in Room 213. Lydia was a wealthy socialite who was found dead under mysterious circumstances. It was rumored she had been murdered by a jealous lover, but the case was never solved. That night, Emily and Mark conducted a séance in Room 213. They lit candles and called upon Lydia's spirit. The room grew colder, and the candles flickered as the spirit manifested once again in the mirror. Emily asked, "Lydia, what happened to you?" The spirit's reflection grew clearer, and Lydia began to weep. Through the mirror, she conveyed a tragic tale of love, betrayal, and murder. Lydia's lover, enraged by her impending marriage to another man, had strangled her in a fit of jealousy. Her spirit remained trapped, seeking justice and closure. Emily and her team worked with local authorities, who reopened the cold case. With the new information provided by Lydia's spirit, they found historical evidence that corroborated her story. The jealous lover, who had since passed away, was revealed as her murderer. The hotel honored Lydia by placing a plaque in Room 213, telling her story and acknowledging her tragic end. After the case was resolved, the paranormal activity ceased, and Lydia's spirit found peace. Emily and her team left New Orleans, satisfied with their work. Room 213 became a part of the hotel's rich history, no longer a source of fear, but a testament to a spirit finally set free. Fourth story, The Whispering Room. In early 2024, a young couple, James and Lisa, moved into a charming old house in the countryside of England. The house had been empty for years, but its rustic appeal and affordable price made it irresistible. They were particularly drawn to a small, cozy room on the second floor, which they decided to turn into their reading nook. From the first night, Lisa noticed something strange about the room. Whenever she sat in the corner to read, she felt as though someone was whispering in her ear. The whispers were indistinct at first, like a distant conversation she couldn't quite make out. She mentioned it to James, but he dismissed it as her imagination. As days went by, the whispers became clearer and more unsettling. Lisa could hear phrases like, "Help me," and "Find the key." She grew increasingly anxious and decided to research the house's history. She discovered that it once belonged to a reclusive woman named Eleanor, who had mysteriously disappeared in the late 1920s. Rumors suggested she was involved in the occult, and her sudden disappearance had fueled local legends. Determined to find out more, Lisa searched the house for any clues. In the attic, she found an old, dusty diary belonging to Eleanor. The diary was filled with cryptic entries about a hidden room and a key that would unlock the truth. The last entry hinted at a secret concealed within the walls of the very room where Lisa heard the whispers. That night, Lisa shared her findings with James. Despite his skepticism, he agreed to help her investigate further. Armed with tools, they carefully examined the room, tapping on the walls until they found a hollow spot. Excitedly, they pried open a section of the wall to reveal a hidden compartment containing a small ornate box. Inside the box was an old key and a faded note that read, "The answers lie below." Following the clue, they searched the basement, where they found a locked door that the key fit perfectly. The door creaked open to reveal a hidden chamber filled with occult artifacts, including candles, symbols drawn on the floor, and an old wooden table. On the table lay a journal detailing Eleanor's experiments with contacting spirits. The final entry explained that Eleanor had successfully summoned a spirit, but had become trapped between worlds, unable to move on. The whispers were her attempts to communicate, to ask for help in being freed from her eternal limbo. Lisa and James, horrified yet determined, decided to perform a ritual described in the journal to release Eleanor's spirit. They followed the instructions carefully, lighting candles and reciting the incantation. As they did, the room grew colder, and the whispers intensified, becoming a desperate plea for freedom. Suddenly, the candles flickered and then went out, plunging the room into darkness. A chilling wind swept through, and for a moment, they saw a faint ghostly figure of Eleanor, her face etched with sorrow. She whispered a final "thank you" before disappearing into the ether. The house fell silent, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. Lisa and James felt an overwhelming sense of peace. They sealed the hidden chamber, respecting Eleanor's memory and her tragic story. From that day on, the room became a tranquil space, free from whispers and shadows. Word of their experience spread, and the house became known not for its haunted past, but for the story of a spirit finally finding peace, thanks to the bravery and determination of James and Lisa. Fifth story, The Room of Shadows. In the bustling city of San Francisco, a high-rise apartment building known for its modern amenities and stunning views harbored a dark secret. Apartment 1408 on the 14th floor was notorious among residents for being the haunted unit. Despite its prime location, it remained vacant for years. In January 2024, Emily, a young tech entrepreneur, moved into the building, attracted by the apartment's beautiful view of the Golden Gate Bridge and its spacious design. She dismissed the rumors as mere urban legends and decided to take up residence in 1408. The first few nights were uneventful, but soon Emily began to notice odd occurrences. The lights would flicker, and shadows seemed to move on their own. One night, as she was working late, she heard faint whispers coming from the hallway. The whispers grew louder, forming indistinct sentences that sent chills down her spine. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily set up cameras and recording devices around the apartment. She reviewed the footage the next day and was startled to see shadowy figures flitting across the screen, often congregating near the bedroom closet. The whispers, when played back, sounded like multiple voices speaking in a strange, archaic language. Seeking answers, Emily researched the building's history and discovered that the site once housed a Victorian mansion owned by a wealthy but reclusive family. In 1906, during the Great Earthquake, the mansion was destroyed and several family members were killed. The survivors moved away, and the land remained empty until the modern apartment building was constructed. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Emily consulted a local historian and a paranormal investigator named Dr. Alan White. Together, they delved deeper into the family's history. They found records of a tragedy. The family's youngest daughter, Annabel, had gone missing during the earthquake. Her body was never found, and it was believed her spirit remained trapped in the ruins of the old mansion. Dr. White and Emily decided to hold a séance in the apartment to contact Annabel's spirit. They gathered in the living room, surrounded by candles and ancient protective symbols. As they began the séance, the room grew cold, and the shadows seemed to coalesce into a single dark figure. Annabel's spirit appeared, her form flickering like a candle flame. Through Dr. White, she communicated her sorrow and fear, revealing that she had been trapped in the closet during the earthquake and had perished there. Her spirit had been wandering, lost and confused ever since. Emily and Dr. White promised to help her find peace. They performed a cleansing ritual invoking ancient rites to guide Annabel's spirit to the afterlife. The shadowy figure grew fainter, and Annabel's whispers turned to words of gratitude. As the ritual concluded, the oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the apartment felt warm and inviting for the first time. Emily and Dr. White sensed that Annabel had finally found peace. Emily decided to keep living in the apartment, feeling a strange connection to the little girl whose spirit she had helped free. Over time, the haunting of apartment 1408 became a tale of redemption rather than fear. Emily shared her story with the building's residents, transforming the apartment's reputation from one of dread to one of hope and renewal. Annabel's spirit was finally at rest, and the shadows no longer haunted the hallways. Sixth story, The Room of Echoes. In early 2024, a group of university students decided to rent an old house near their campus in Boston. The house, known for its spacious rooms and affordable rent, had one peculiar feature: a small, windowless room in the basement. The landlord warned them to avoid the room, saying it had a history, but they laughed off the warning as superstition. The students, Sarah, Tom, and Rachel, moved in and soon settled into their new home. They used the basement room for storage, noting its damp and musty smell. One night, Tom heard strange noises coming from the room. At first, he thought it was just the old house settling, but the noises became more distinct whispers, footsteps, and the sound of something scraping against the walls. Curiosity getting the better of him, Tom decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, he descended into the basement. As he opened the door to the small room, he was hit by a wave of cold air. The whispers grew louder, filling the room with an eerie chorus of voices. Tom felt a chill run down his spine, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. The next day, Tom told Sarah and Rachel about his experience. Skeptical, but intrigued, they decided to investigate together. They discovered that the whispers seemed to be coming from the walls themselves. Rachel, who was studying history, suggested they research the house's past. They found that the house had been built in the late 1800s by a man named Jonathan Greaves, a wealthy but eccentric inventor. Greaves had used the basement room as his workshop, conducting secret experiments that were rumored to be dangerous. In 1901, there was a mysterious explosion in the house, killing Greaves and trapping several servants in the basement. Their bodies were never recovered, and the room was sealed for years. Determined to uncover the truth, the students decided to conduct a séance in the basement room. They gathered around a makeshift altar, lit candles, and called upon the spirits trapped within the walls. As they chanted, the whispers grew louder, turning into anguished cries. The air became thick with a palpable sense of dread. Suddenly, the room grew intensely cold, and the shadows in the corners seemed to stretch and twist. A ghostly figure materialized before them, a man in old-fashioned clothes with a look of torment on his face. He introduced himself as Jonathan Greaves and begged for their help in freeing the trapped souls. Greaves explained that his experiments had gone horribly wrong, causing the explosion that killed him and his servants. Their spirits had been trapped in the room ever since, unable to find peace. The students, moved by the tragic story, vowed to help. Following Greaves' instructions, they performed a ritual to release the spirits. As they completed the final incantation, the room was filled with a blinding light, and the cries of anguish turned to sighs of relief. The ghostly figures of the servants appeared briefly, nodding in gratitude before fading away. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the room felt warmer and more welcoming. The students sealed the room, leaving it empty as a memorial to those who had suffered there. They shared the story with their landlord, who was relieved that the haunting had finally ended. Word of their experience spread, and the house became known not for its dark past, but for the courage and compassion of the students who had freed the trapped spirits. The Room of Echoes was no longer a place of fear, but a testament to the power of empathy and the importance of remembering the past. Seventh story, The Room with the Red Door. In the outskirts of a small town in Maine, there was an old mansion known as Blackwood Manor. The manor had been abandoned for decades, shrouded in rumors of dark happenings and tragic events. At the heart of these stories was the infamous Room with the Red Door, said to be the epicenter of the house's malevolent energy. In March 2024, a team of paranormal investigators, led by Jack Thompson, decided to spend a weekend at Blackwood Manor to document any supernatural activity. The team consisted of Jack, his assistant Laura, tech expert Chris, and psychic medium Evelyn. They were determined to uncover the truth behind the room's sinister reputation. On their first night, they set up their equipment throughout the manor, saving the Room with the Red Door for last. The room, located on the third floor, had a heavy, oppressive atmosphere. The door itself was unsettling, with deep red paint that seemed to almost pulsate in the dim light. As they entered the room, the temperature dropped noticeably. Evelyn, the psychic, immediately felt a powerful presence. She described it as a swirling vortex of anger and despair emanating from the center of the room. They set up their cameras and audio recorders, hoping to capture evidence of the paranormal. Around midnight, the team gathered in the room for a séance, hoping to contact any spirits. As they began, the air grew colder, and the candles flickered violently. Evelyn closed her eyes and began to channel the spirit. Her voice changed, becoming deep and guttural, as if something was speaking through her. "We are trapped," the voice said. "He won't let us leave." Jack asked, "Who is keeping you here? What happened in this room?" The spirit, still speaking through Evelyn, recounted a horrific tale. Decades ago, a man named Victor Blackwood had lived in the manor. He was a cruel and sadistic figure who dabbled in dark rituals, using the Red Room to trap and torture the souls of his victims. Victor's ultimate goal was to achieve immortality by feeding off the suffering of others. The essence was abruptly interrupted by a loud bang. The team watched in horror as the walls seemed to bleed, dark red liquid oozing from the cracks. Shadows moved independently of the light, and the room filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. Chris checked the camera footage and saw the shadows forming a humanoid figure, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. The figure moved closer to the team, and Evelyn screamed as if in pain. She collapsed, and Jack and Laura rushed to her side, trying to wake her. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness. The red door slammed shut with a deafening noise, trapping them inside. The team members felt an invisible force pressing down on them, making it hard to breathe. Jack struggled to stay calm, knowing they had to find a way out. In a moment of clarity, Laura remembered a passage from an old journal they had found in the manor. It described a counter-ritual that could banish the evil spirits and break Victor's hold on the trapped souls. With time running out, they decided to perform the ritual. They gathered around Evelyn, who was still unconscious, and began to chant the incantations. The room shook violently, and the shadows writhed as if in agony. The pressure intensified, but they continued, driven by the hope of freeing the trapped souls. As they finished the final chant, a blinding light filled the room, and the oppressive force lifted. The red door creaked open, and the bleeding walls stopped. Evelyn awoke, disoriented but alive. The malevolent presence was gone, and the room felt eerily calm. The team hurried out of the manor, vowing never to return. They reviewed the footage, which clearly showed the shadowy figure and the bleeding walls, validating their terrifying experience. Blackwood Manor remained abandoned, but the story of the room with the red door and the horrors within became a chilling legend, warning others of the dark secrets some places hold. Eighth story, The Enchanted Room. In late 2024, a young couple, David and Claire, moved into a quaint Victorian house in the charming town of Salem, Massachusetts. The house, built in the 1800s, had a storied past and was known for its beautiful architecture and eerie charm. Among the many rooms in the house, one stood out, a small octagonal room on the second floor that the locals called the Enchanted Room. On their first night, David and Claire decided to explore their new home. They were particularly intrigued by the Enchanted Room, which had walls adorned with intricate wood carvings and a large antique mirror that seemed out of place. As they stepped inside, they felt a strange energy, as if the room was alive. The first few nights were peaceful, but things soon took a sinister turn. Claire began to have vivid nightmares about a woman in the mirror, desperately trying to communicate with her. She would wake up drenched in sweat, feeling an unshakable sense of dread. David, too, started experiencing odd occurrences. Objects would move on their own, and faint whispers echoed through the house at night. Determined to understand what was happening, David and Claire decided to investigate the room's history. They learned that the house once belonged to a woman named Eliza Hawthorne, a reputed witch who mysteriously vanished in the late 1800s. The Enchanted Room was her private sanctuary, where she performed her rituals. One night, driven by a mix of curiosity and fear, Claire stood before the antique mirror and called out to Eliza. The mirror's surface rippled like water, and the ghostly figure of Eliza appeared, her eyes filled with sorrow and desperation. Claire felt an overwhelming urge to help her. The next day, they consulted a local historian and a paranormal expert, Dr. Ethan Graves. He explained that Eliza's spirit was trapped in the mirror, a result of a powerful spell gone wrong. The only way to free her was to perform a counter-ritual that would reverse the effects. With Dr. Graves' guidance, David and Claire gathered the necessary items: candles, a chalice of purified water, and a book of ancient spells. They waited until midnight, the witching hour, and began the ritual. As they chanted the incantations, the room grew colder, and the air became thick with tension. The mirror glowed with an ethereal light, and Eliza's spirit became more visible. Suddenly, a dark, shadowy figure emerged from the mirror, trying to stop the ritual. It was the malevolent spirit of Eliza's former lover, who had betrayed her and trapped her soul. The room shook violently, and the candles flickered as the dark spirit advanced toward them. Summoning their courage, David and Claire continued the ritual, their voices growing louder and more determined. The shadowy figure howled in rage, but Eliza's spirit began to glow brighter, pushing back the darkness. With a final, powerful incantation, the dark spirit was banished, and the mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces. Eliza's spirit, free at last, smiled gratefully before fading away, leaving a sense of peace and tranquility in the room. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the house felt warm and welcoming once more. David and Claire repaired the room, preserving the broken pieces of the mirror as a reminder of their encounter with the supernatural. They shared their story with the local community, and the enchanted room became a symbol of courage and resilience. The tale of the enchanted room and the witch who found peace after centuries became a part of Salem's rich tapestry of history, reminding everyone that even in the darkest times, hope and determination can triumph. Ninth story, The Haunted Studio. In October 2024, aspiring artist Mia Parker moved into an old loft in the heart of Brooklyn, New York. The building, once a factory, had been converted into artist studios and apartments. Mia was thrilled to find a spacious unit at an affordable price, perfect for her creative endeavors. However, the landlord gave her a peculiar warning: never stay in the studio after midnight. Ignoring the warning as superstition, Mia settled into her new home. The loft had high ceilings, large windows, and an undeniable charm. There was, however, one odd feature: a small, locked room at the back of the studio with a heavy iron door. The landlord had mentioned it was just a storage room, but Mia couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. The first few weeks were uneventful, and Mia threw herself into her painting. She often lost track of time, working late into the night. One evening, she noticed a strange, musty smell coming from the locked room. Dismissing it as her imagination, she continued painting. As the clock struck midnight, Mia heard faint, rhythmic tapping coming from the locked room. She paused, listening intently, but the noise stopped. The next night, the tapping returned, this time accompanied by a soft, eerie humming. Mia's curiosity grew, and she decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, Mia examined the door. To her surprise, she found an old, rusty key hidden in a crevice nearby. With a mix of apprehension and excitement, she unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was small and cluttered with old, dusty canvases and broken furniture. In the corner, she saw an antique easel with a partially finished painting covered by a tattered cloth. As Mia pulled off the cloth, a wave of cold air hit her. The painting depicted a dark, twisted forest with shadowy figures lurking among the trees. It was hauntingly beautiful, but gave Mia an uneasy feeling. Suddenly, she felt a presence behind her and spun around, but the room was empty. That night, Mia had vivid nightmares of being chased through the forest in the painting. She woke up in a cold sweat, her heart racing. Determined to uncover the truth, she researched the building's history and discovered that it once belonged to a reclusive artist named Victor Grayson. Grayson was known for his dark, surrealist works and had disappeared under mysterious circumstances in the 1920s. Rumors suggested he had gone mad, claiming his paintings were gateways to another realm. The next night, Mia stayed up, waiting for the midnight hour. As the clock struck 12, the tapping and humming began again, louder and more insistent. She returned to the locked room, now armed with her phone to document any strange occurrences. The temperature plummeted as she entered, and the painting seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Mia's phone captured a faint, ghostly figure emerging from the painting, its eyes filled with sorrow and madness. The figure reached out, and Mia felt an icy grip on her arm. She struggled to break free, her fear escalating. In a desperate bid, she remembered a passage from Grayson's journal that she had read online, detailing a ritual to close the portals within his paintings. Mia recited the incantation, her voice trembling. The ghostly figure screamed in anguish, and the painting began to glow with an otherworldly light. The room shook, and the shadowy figures in the painting seemed to dissolve into the darkness. With a final burst of energy, the ghost was sucked back into the canvas, and the room fell silent. Exhausted but relieved, Mia sealed the room and hung a tapestry over the door. She showed the footage to her landlord, who was shocked but grateful that the haunting was finally over. Mia continued to live and work in the loft, her art gaining a newfound depth and intensity from her harrowing experience. The story of the haunted studio spread, becoming a legend among the artistic community in Brooklyn. Mia's encounter with the supernatural left an indelible mark on her work and her life, a reminder of the thin veil between this world and the next. 10th story, The Room of Shadows. In December 2024, a group of friends, Emily, Jake, Sarah, and Ben, decided to spend their winter break exploring an abandoned asylum on the outskirts of their hometown in upstate New York. The asylum, known as Hollow Oaks, had been closed for decades and was notorious for its dark past and rumored hauntings. Among the many rooms in the sprawling facility, one was particularly feared, Room 713. The group, fueled by a mix of curiosity and the thrill of the unknown, planned to document their adventure and post it online. Armed with flashlights, cameras, and recording equipment, they made their way to Hollow Oaks one cold, snowy evening. The dilapidated building loomed ahead, its windows dark and broken, and the air around it seemed to hum with an eerie energy. As they entered the asylum, the atmosphere was thick with decay and a sense of foreboding. They explored the crumbling hallways, finding old medical equipment, scattered documents, and graffiti-covered walls. Despite the unsettling environment, they pressed on, determined to find Room 713. After navigating through the maze-like corridors, they finally stood before the door marked 713. The door was reinforced with iron, and the number was barely visible under layers of dust and grime. With a deep breath, Jake pushed the door open, and they stepped inside. The room was surprisingly intact compared to the rest of the asylum. It was small, with a single metal bed, a rusted table, and a large cracked mirror on one wall. As they set up their equipment, Emily noticed a series of strange symbols etched into the floor around the bed, forming a crude circle. Sarah, who had always been interested in the paranormal, suggested that the symbols might be some kind of protective ward. They decided to conduct a seance to try and communicate with any spirits that might be lingering in the room. They gathered in a circle, holding hands, and Sarah began to recite an incantation she had found online. As soon as she finished, the temperature in the room plummeted. Their breath became visible in the icy air, and the symbols on the floor seemed to glow faintly. The mirror on the wall fogged up, and a message slowly appeared. "Help us." Suddenly, the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. The lights on their cameras flickered, and a low, menacing growl echoed through the room. Shadows began to move independently, crawling up the walls and forming into a dark humanoid figure with glowing red eyes. The entity spoke in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You should not have come here. This place is cursed." Panic set in as the friends tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The shadows grew thicker, and the air became oppressive. Emily, remembering a story she had read about Hollow Oaks, realized that room 713 was where a notorious patient named Dr. Elias Thorne had conducted sadistic experiments on the other inmates. His twisted spirit was said to haunt the room, trapping anyone who dared enter. Desperate to escape, Emily shouted, "We're sorry. We didn't mean to disturb you." The entity paused, its red eyes narrowing. "You can leave, but only if you help release the others." Emily, Jake, Sarah, and Ben agreed without hesitation. The entity instructed them to destroy the mirror, which was the anchor for the spirits trapped in the asylum. With shaking hands, Ben picked up a chair and smashed the mirror. As the glass shattered, a blinding light filled the room, and the oppressive weight lifted. The door swung open, and the friends stumbled out, gasping for breath. They hurried out of the asylum, not stopping until they were safely back in their car. They looked back at Hollow Oaks, which now seemed less menacing, as if a dark cloud had been lifted. The footage they captured was blurry and chaotic, but it clearly showed the supernatural events they had experienced. They decided not to post it online, realizing that some secrets were better left buried. The story of Room 713 and the spirits of Hollow Oaks became a cautionary tale in their hometown, a reminder of the dark pasts that sometimes linger just out of sight. And for Emily, Jake, Sarah, and Ben, it was an experience they would never forget.